Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today for our session. Our session today is Building Your Digital Presence. Today we're going to look into what goes into building and managing your online presence in a multi-channel world. Our presenter today is Nadine Hussein. Nadine works with me here at INM. She's our web technology strategist, and she works with a number of our clients to help build websites, align social media channels and strategies, and provide guidance on how to consolidate and manage the overall digital presence of an organization. Her understanding of web technology and social media, as well as her depth in branding and project management, help her to create and implement and manage strategies for organizations looking to develop and maintain their digital presence. My name is Andrea Simmons, and I'm the Marketing Director here at INM. I'm going to be your host today, so I'm the wizard behind the curtain in terms of all the technology. So if there's anything that comes up during the session, or if you have any questions for Nadine while she's presenting, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for those and making sure that we're able to address them. Before we get into our subject matter today, just a couple of quick items. Today's session should be between 35 and 40 minutes or so, and we're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes set aside at the end for questions. If any questions come to mind while she's presenting, feel free in the questions tab, which is on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you can just expand that and type your question right there. We'll keep a running queue of those, and at the end we'll be able to address those directly. If you have any challenges with audio, or you're having some slide issue or anything like that, please also use the chat window, which is the bottom right-hand window on your screen, to let me know. That way I can, let Nadine know she needs to speak up, or we can pause for a second for the slides to catch up. We are going to be recording this session today, so if there's any of your colleagues that weren't able to make it that you think this may be interesting for, it's going to be added to our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to access that. I'll make sure I send out a link to everybody with that status as soon as that's been updated. Also on our YouTube channel, if this subject matter is interesting to you, we have a number of webinars we've done in the past that we've put together into playlists on YouTube. So those are all accessible to you as well. So we'll provide you some information on where that channel is. So I'd say we're ready to get started this morning. So Nadine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So good morning, everybody. And before we begin our session, I wanted to just take a moment to review the agenda for today. So as an introduction, I'd like to take a quick look at what the relationship between customers and owners have looked like over the years. And then we'll look at what we understand by a digital presence these days, including how your clients engage with your organization. We'll look at what goes into creating a positive digital experience and how to get started. And then I'll look at some very specific channels and discuss how they are best used. Following that, we'll look at how we monitor and measure the success of our digital presence. And we'll end with a bit of information about INM and look at some recommended next steps. So let's get started. If we think about customers and how they've engaged with businesses over the years, well, for many years there was just one way, which was this way. There was just one way. You had to interact face-to-face. You had to go to the business location, the store, and you had to deal with the business owner. So at that point, all you had to worry about was making the store look nice and presentable. And then with the invention of the telephone, suddenly you had two ways. You could go to the store still, obviously, but then suddenly you were able to speak to people on the phone without seeing them. So suddenly employees had to have a polished phone presence, since really that could make or break the client's decision on whether they were going to continue the interaction and go visit the store. And then, of course, the internet came along, and now businesses were able to pay for the creation of corporate websites. At the very beginning, that was the main thing that happened to businesses, is they had a virtual storefront through the medium of the internet. So that was another point of contact that needed to be polished. The thing is, what all these things had in common was that the business owner could control all of them. You could train your employees to be polite in the store, on the phone, and you had control of the look of your store and to create a website according to your guidelines. Today, there are many more ways than just those three mediums. Today, a digital presence is the combined view of various different channels, and it's this combined view of how your organization is reflected online. These various channels, there's only a few here on the screenshot, but it can be anything. Obviously, it's your brand as a whole, but it can be your corporate website, it can be a blog, it can be the search results when you search for your company, your advertising campaign, your email marketing. Are you listed in online directories? Do you give access to your website for mobile users? How do they see your brand on a mobile phone? And obviously, what about your social media presence? So it's with this exponential growth in these interaction channels that the way consumers engage with your organization today is completely different than it's been all these years. Today, consumers they no longer first see your website, then call you for more information, and then visit your store. It's not linear that way. They can come in from a myriad of entry points, and they can bounce around from one to the next. A consumer can maybe see an advertisement, they may receive one of your promotions, or they may simply search for your products online. And from here, the consumer may then choose to read some reviews online. He could decide to go to your Facebook page and like it. He could look for your listing when he's wandering around and looking on his mobile phone, or he can simply go and choose to buy one of your products. So basically, any touch point can become an entry point or an exit point in the customer engagement cycle. Okay, so now that we've had a bit of a snapshot of the various elements that go into a digital presence, let's look at what goes into establishing a positive one, a positive digital presence for your organization. So in order for your customers dealing with your organization, a few things you'll need to think of. You'll need to think of your brand and identity. So ensure that you create a similar brand and identity of your offline brand to your online brand. This includes obviously things like your logo or your company colors, your tagline, and messaging statements, for example. So they don't have to be identical. What I'm saying is that the customer needs to clearly understand that he's dealing with the same organization when he's offline and online. Obviously, you want to create this consistent look and feel so that you can leverage it everywhere online. You need to have icons, logos, again, some standard messaging statements, and for example, your company colors. So make sure then, of course, that your site and these channels are usable. That means make sure your website is online, that your Facebook, LinkedIn pages, or whatever other channels you choose have some basic content on them. Make sure that users can find what they need and accomplish their goals. So for example, have you associated certain keywords to your website so that people can find it through search engines? Or have you listed yourself in industry directories? So we'll discuss this a little bit more detail later. But my point here was to remind you that a negative user experience will obviously impact a client's thought about your brand. So obviously you want to ensure that your digital presence is polished. Also, remember that your digital presence is not only the elements that the client goes out to find for himself, meaning when he visits your website or one of your social media channels. There are also elements that are pushed to him, things like newsletters and marketing emails, even personal email communication from your team members, and obviously things like phone calls. So on the conversation continuum, all these as well as activities. So a pull activity means where the client is pulled to your points of contact as opposed to information being pushed to him. All of these activities, regardless, they count as part of your digital presence. So interesting things to remember, things like email signatures, phone greeting messages, the branding and look and feel of your newsletter, the detail of your RSS channels, and all these elements will also affect your client's experience. Okay, so now we've taken an overall look at everything that a digital presence might include. How do you start? How do you go about building this positive digital experience? The first step in building your digital presence begins with understanding the current state of things. What presence do you have today? Interestingly, a very quick way to find out is just by searching for yourself and your organization online. Go to Google, search your organization, and see what comes up. You might find, for example, that you're listed in certain directories that you didn't even know about. Also, how is your organization's brand reflected online? So look at these various results. These are all entry points. And see things like, do the directory listings need any updating? Is the address and contact name accurate? Are the products and services listed up to date? And what experience does a potential customer have with your organization? So if a client looks you up, what is he going to find? Will he see reviews? And what do these reviews say about you? Does he find partner listings? And how do these partners present you? So definitely the first step is to look at where you are right now and what you have to work with. Having problems forwarding the slides today. So now before you go ahead and start transitioning your brand online or even working with your digital presence, let's creating a synergy and consistency with your brand. So this is what I mentioned before. You look at your colors, your logo, your imagery. For example, can you adapt them to an online medium? Can you use your corporate website logo in its current format? Is it easily distributable, uploadable? Do you even know what your company color codes are so that you can distribute them and customize your social media channels? What about your brand value and principles? Firstly, what are they? And how do they reflect online? Which obviously leads to more generally your messaging. What is your tagline? What is your mission statement? What are your product offerings? And again, how do they reflect online? And what about your communication style? Is your communication style until now only for print media? Can it be translated to web copy or to content for your social media channels? And of course, very important, always bear in mind your target audience and your business objectives. What audiences might use what channels? What are the goals and objectives for adopting new channels? So we've seen that there's so many options of channels out there. It's important to choose the right channel. What I mean by that is you need to find channels that fit with these objectives, that fit with your brand identity and value. So for example, it's not because having a Twitter account is trendy and it's because what everybody does, that it doesn't mean it's the right choice for your business. Twitter may not be the option for everyone, and the same applies with Facebook. It works well for some businesses, but it isn't the best path for others. So what I want to do in the next few slides is look at the major social media channels and discuss the properties and values for each. Before that, I wanted to give you a quick note about setting up these channels. So even if you're not ready to come online with your full digital strategy right away, I think it's very important to claim your brand and establish a consistent name. So most sites will require you to do so, whether it's choosing your official business name, your username, the words that go into your URL. It's good to choose a name that you can consistently use throughout. And there are tools to help you with that. Here's one, for example, on this screenshot. There's a site named namecheck.com, and it allows you to search multiple sites at once to see which usernames are available. So this will help you choose a name for your company that's intuitive and available on most platforms. So in fact, in this screenshot, you see here what happens when you put INM in the search field. And you can see all the listings in green are those where the username INM is still available, and the red ones where it's taken. Hopefully those red ones are taken by us, Integration New Media. So take the time to claim your name, or at least on the most popular sites. And that ensures that when you are ready to deploy those specific channels, your brand isn't taken by another company. So let's take a look at these various channels. So basically what I've tried to do for the next following slides is to try and keep the same format throughout all the slides and look at, for each channel, what type of audience it's good for, what user profiles use this channel, and why it may be interesting for your specific business. And I'll try to give you a few interesting statistics as well. So obviously we have to start with Facebook. Everyone knows Facebook, and probably everyone uses it. Facebook is really the predominant consumer platform. It has over 500 million users, which is 1 in every 13 people on the planet. And half of them are logged in on any given day. And yes, Facebook is mainly perceived as being for individuals to share their content and their life with their friends. But what may be less known is the popularity of company pages. Facebook has become the second preferred way for organizations to share content, obviously. So email is still the first, but Facebook is pretty impressive. Some other stats that I thought might be useful is When you think about it, what compels someone to follow or to like a brand on Facebook? Well, 18% of the people say that it's because there was interesting or entertaining content on the page. So if you do have a Facebook page, you definitely need to leverage it to share content and share interesting, valuable information. And also another statistic that's nice is that an average post by a brand on Facebook will generate 54 likes. So that's pretty impressive. So in terms of audience, Facebook is definitely useful for all types of business relationships centering around the consumer. I wrote B2C here, but it's really anything centering around the consumer. What I mean is, for example, business to consumer relationships or consumer to consumer relationships. B2C companies should definitely be the first in line to create a company page. Facebook can definitely help with client acquisition. So if a current customer likes it, it will be seen by all his friends, and which may then encourage new client interactions. So it's definitely a two-way conversation between the customer and the business, since your page is now open to client comments. Honestly, I may not necessarily recommend Facebook right away for companies that are more into the B2B realm. I think the interaction possible between one business to another may be limited. I definitely want to see some stats that show maybe otherwise, but I think there are some better channels for B2B type companies. All right, moving on. Obviously, a lot of people have been talking about Twitter. It is probably the second most famous social media channel, even though, honestly, some people absolutely love it and others are not really even sure what Twitter is about. So until recently, Twitter was still something of a mystery to most non-technical people. But I think that it can no longer honestly be ignored. So the thing is, Twitter is extremely easy to use. And even still, I find that still the point of Twitter. So let's start with some stats. Twitter has 106 million users, of which 27% log in every day, and 37% of those are on a mobile device. And what's a very interesting statistic, I think, is that 25% of Twitter users follow at least one brand, and 67% of these followers will repurchase something from that brand. So I think the great strength of Twitter is that the messaging is light. It's only 140 characters. So many people see this as the opposite of heavy corporate messaging. There's a more casual tone to it, and the point of having a Twitter account usually is that you send out regular messages. So it's less likely to be the standard heavy corporate messaging, but generally something more timely, dynamic, something more interesting. And the reach obviously is impressive because most people can view their Twitter feed from anywhere, whether they're on the computer or their mobile device. The chance of your messages being seen by your followers most of the time. So I would definitely see Twitter as a tool for retention over direct client acquisition, but I think both are possible. Retention, obviously, since your messages will allow you to remain top of mind for your current clients who follow you, but also I think acquisition, since potential clients can follow you for a while to get a feel for your organization, and your messaging may sway them one way or another. So another interesting trend with Twitter is the number of times I see clients reach out directly to the customer, to the organization with a support question. It feels like there's an actual, because it feels like with Twitter there's an actual living person on the side of the company watching the tweets come in. Clients feel more confident to address their concerns directly through Twitter straight to the organization. And obviously on your end, you know that somebody better be there listening and answering to show that they're on behalf of the organization. All right, moving on, LinkedIn. So just like Facebook is mainly centered around the relationship with consumers, I think LinkedIn is the predominant platform for B2B, meaning business-to-business activities, for example, such as networking. Other great uses for LinkedIn, things like showcasing your business profile, hiring, event promotion, group participation. So LinkedIn is really about professional relationships and their connections. It's where people go to see connections to a company and to leverage their business connections for introductions, networking, and more. So in terms of user profile, what's interesting is that there's 60% male, 40% female, and LinkedIn is definitely mainly used in the US, Europe being the second largest group there. And a little bit more statistics on the actual LinkedIn. We have high tech at 16%, the finance industry at 13%, Then it's manufacturing, medical, and corporate are the next big segments. The next channel I'd like to look at is YouTube. So it may not seem like an obvious business tool, but honestly the numbers are pretty staggering. YouTube has 490 million unique users worldwide per month. And these people rack up an estimated 92 billion page views each month. It attracts, we know that, a relatively young but dedicated audience. 50% are 20 years or younger. And the average person spends 15 minutes per day on YouTube, which is really impressive. So 70% of YouTube users come from outside the US. That's also interesting if your business is not necessarily focused in the US. I really do think it is actually a viable platform for interactive content and ad campaigns. If you think about it, 94% of Advertising Age, the publication, their top 100 advertisers have run campaigns on YouTube and on the Google Content Network. And another interesting statistic here is that more video content is uploaded to YouTube in a 60-day period than the 3 major US television networks have created in the last 60 years. That's kind of impressive. So I definitely, in terms of content, what do you post on YouTube? If you're an organization, I think video is a medium that is very unique and can be used for specific things like product information, product demos, presentations, interviews, and obviously remember that your videos for normal, regular accounts are limited to 15-minute segments, which I think is actually a really good idea in terms of the amount of time you want someone to be spending watching something that you've published. So the next slide is Google+. This one's kind of a tough one to discuss because it's a really recent tool. It's only just emerged about a month ago. The audience here is primarily consumers, so C2C. The platform has reached an impressive 25 million users, which is a lot if you think that it's only been launched a month ago. And I guess there are emerging business players in the top 100 pages, but really, honestly, consumers still dominate. So what is the purpose of Google+? Google+ allows you to have a personal profile and to build circles for engaging with different types of contacts. In terms of communication style, it's still informal, I would say, but it's got a professional engagement to it. So what's in it for me? A few examples so far of great business presence. There are actually a good business presence on this channel, but honestly, like I mentioned, it's a little too early to see how we can use it from a business perspective. In terms of user profile, interestingly again, are male. Apparently this is declining, but it's still a mainly male audience. And definitely skewed to technical and educational markets, which again makes sense given that it's a new tool. And so far the companies we've seen on Google+ are really the big brand names. Interestingly, another statistic I just noticed I have here is that 70% of Google+ users are college grads. Oh, no, sorry, my bad. I have the wrong notes here. Please ignore the last statistic. Sorry. It'll come back in a minute. This is for check-in services. This is the next slide I'd like to look at, and we're not talking here about a specific channel, but we're talking about a type of channel. So many services exist today. You may have heard of Foursquare, but there's also Facebook Places, and Google has Google Places. So what is a check-in service? Well, basically companies create a listing with one of those sites, and they attach a physical address to it. So obviously this is only useful if you're a business that has a physical presence that customers can interact with. So every time a customer is patient, they set their mobile phone to check in. So this information is then displayed on the customer's profile. He's just checked in to Burger King or to the Staples, for example. And it also shows up, I believe, on the company profile. So typically, organizations that benefit from check-in services are ones looking to attract a local audience and create a sense of interest by the number of people that check in. So it's a great way to reward loyal clients. Organizations, for example, can offer special deals after a certain amount of check-ins. So think about it. You could offer the 5th check-in or club status for a certain number of visits. So for check-in services, I understand that the audience is mainly a young audience. 86% are between 18 and 43. Again, mostly male. 78%, so I think that's a lot. But I think it may be quite telling. I think maybe women are less likely to want to tell everyone else where they are at every moment of the day. But again, this may change as the services are used more frequently. And this is where 70% are college graduates. So because there is a reward system behind it, I think that these users are primarily seeking notoriety and prizes. So so far, not many organizations are offering rewards. I think that today about 500,000 businesses provide this type of rewards for check-ins, so that's not that many. So that I wanted to take a look at. And honestly, one of the key questions I get from clients is, well, how can I keep an eye on everything? It's often the reasons why clients are actually reluctant to explore a new channel, and just because they think their workload is going to increase so much. And they are on the market that can help you with this. They basically help you to monitor many channels at one time. Examples here are Hootsuite and TweetDeck are both online, and they're both free tools that allow you to aggregate many channels into one view. So you can watch everything that's going on, you can post to different channels at one time. So if you want to use one message for your Twitter feed and your Facebook page, you can do that. Another one worth discussing is Radiant 6, which got bought out by Salesforce last year. It's definitely a really, really powerful social media monitoring tool. It is a paid solution, so obviously the features and what you're is much more powerful and sometimes maybe overkill depending on who you are. But it's a really good solution, for example, when you have teams in your organization that deal with social and organizing it that way. Important thing here is that you have to remember that when you start having social media channels, you're opening yourself up for dialogue with your consumers. And now there's all these different channels, so you need to have someone who's able to respond and who watches what's happening, what the activity is. For example, someone may ask a support question through Twitter, as I mentioned before, or a review may be coming in that's posted on Facebook. So your organization needs to show a presence by being responsive and not silent. A couple of additional tools that I think are worth mentioning. Google Alerts. So Google offers a service. It's really simple. You just put in your email address, and then you decide what terms you want to be. So you can search for as many keywords as you like. Obviously, maybe you want to watch who's talking about your company, so you put in your company name, key staff members, product brands, or any other strategic terminology that you want to keep an eye on. For example, maybe industry terms to see how they're trending. Google Analytics, obviously a lot of people know Google Analytics. It's free, a lot of people use it, and it allows you to set up custom reports to track your metrics, and setting it up is very, very easy. And another one that's worth mentioning is FeedBurner. So this one really applies to deal with RSS feeds. So it can track the number of RSS followers for your site or your blog. For those of you who are not familiar with what an RSS feed is, they are channels that users can subscribe to be alerted of anything new that is posted on your blog or your website. So that way, the reader doesn't have to go and open a browser and go to your website to check if there's anything. The link is pushed to him by email or by any other RSS reader. All right, so we've shown you what types of tools you can use to monitor activity. Now you need to know what you're actually going to monitor. So of course it depends on what channels your digital presence reaches, but one metric I think that is really great to track when you're looking at your digital presence overall is your total reach. So this is INM's total reach. This figure represents the total exposure that we have to the market. It shows progression over time and obviously the reach per channel. So it's important for you to set up your own key performance metrics. Again, it depends on what your business is, what channels you're leveraging, but there are a few that you may want to think about. Think about monitoring impressions. So that's mainly important for advertisements such as Google AdWords. Available also on Facebook for Facebook pages, you could see how many times any post you put on your page would appear on people's news feeds. I noticed a couple of days ago that this wasn't available anymore. It may come back, so it's something to watch. I thought it was a really useful tool. Think about referrals. So set up reports that show where your traffic is coming from. And you never know, you may actually discover new channels you didn't realize existed. And in that thought, think about your entry points. So where do people come into to then interact with your website, for example? So you may discover interesting behaviors. For example, you may realize that most people who start by interacting with your Facebook page generally end up on a specific section of your website. So you may notice specific paths and behaviors that you can then leverage in terms of what information you provide to whom. So one thing that's changed with all these new channels is that it's no longer just a question of setting up a analytics. The tool also comes with its own performance metrics, and each organization may have different types of needs. So, for example, a simple example, some organizations may be interested in watching how many people retweet their Twitter announcements. And to other people, that may not be interesting at all. They'd rather see how many times they are mentioned in people's original tweets. So again, this obviously depends on the goals and objectives you set for yourself, and then you just want to make sure that you measure and track that these objectives are being reached, or what can you do to adjust. So I will actually now pass the meeting over to Andrea, because I'd like to discuss a little bit about INM, Integration New Media. So Andrea, would you like to take over?
Great. Thanks, Nadine. Let me just pop that. Oh, actually, I'm going to give you back this.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Great. So we just wanted to give a little bit of information as to why we're presenting the subject today, a little bit of detail about who we are and what we do. So to start, Integration New Media has been around now for about 20 years, and we have years and years of successful client relationships. We're about a team of 25. That's a mix of project managers, designers, developers, UX experts. And we are very strongly connected with a number of the key enterprise players, with Microsoft, with Apple, and recently we've become an Adobe Enterprise Solution Partner. Our history was really rooted in multimedia production, and we had a series of products that helped organizations that were in that industry to build interactive client engagements. Over the last several years, we've brought out a successful line of digital publishing products, as well as we've done custom development for websites and for other organizations with rich internet applications. So our mission is really that we build digital solutions that deliver results. So it's precisely what we do is user interface design, web development, mobile development, rich internet applications, as well as a lot of work with customer experience. So how do you create the technology backend and processes that really deliver an integrated customer experience environment? And then how do you build the tools under that? So that's, you know, your mobile presence, your digital publishing strategy, your website, and any other applications that may involve, and how they all play together to create that overall customer engagement experience. And at the foundation of everything that we do is a mix of balancing user experience, solid software engineering practices, and business objectives. We really feel that addressing any one individually really doesn't have as much of an impact for the business. So we look at leveraging industry tools and technologies and being able to piece those together with some custom engineering to create unique solutions. At the same time, addressing the user experience, user interface design, usability, and meeting the business objectives of an organization. So what is your primary goal for this change in your organization, whether it happens to be, you know, increase the number of clients through the development of a new website that's delivered across multiple platforms. So we look at what the business objectives are and how to orchestrate solutions that really meet your needs.
Some of our clients that we've worked with in the past, we've got about 200, 250 clients over the past 20 years. We typically do fairly large mandates with many of them, and we have a very strong retention rate. A lot of folks come back to us for project after project. We've got folks in the entertainment industry, publishing sector, association, market, technology, healthcare, all across the board, certainly a good mix of clients. So that's a little bit about us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions if you've got anything based on today's conversation, anything specific to your organization and your digital presence strategy. If there's anything you'd like to ask us, it's an open forum. Just on your right-hand side, about halfway down the screen, there's a tab called Questions. I'll open that up. If there's anything if there's anything you'd like to ask, feel free to include that there, please.
Has there been any questions that happened during?
I did have one earlier. Yeah, I did have one earlier that I'd like to share with you. One of the things that I was asked was a lot of people are intimidated by the amount of effort that social media may take for them. This is something that I did have a quick question here today, as well as I wanted to make sure that I address this as well, because we've had this quite frequently from other clients.
You know, this is really interesting. It's funny that this is the question that came up, because honestly, this is really what my clients are also asking me. So, you know, really what they're asking is, I think this is what the question was, is, you know, like, how long does it take for someone to post to all these different channels? So, you know, the question is, do you need somebody full-time? So I would definitely say that I don't think you need somebody full-time. I think that it does take time to set up your channels at the beginning, build your unified strategy. As we saw, there's some work to be done before you launch yourself into choosing your channels. You need to think about your objectives and so on. And then you do need to set up the channels that you choose to set up. But I don't think it's a full-time job at all. I think unless your channels really pick up speed and become super active, and if that's the case, then I'd say that's a good problem to have, and it'll create a lot of interest and potentially lots of business for your organization. But honestly, in a typical setting, most people can assign someone. I would say, you know, to start off with maybe 15, 30 minutes a day, because like I mentioned, you have a little bit of setup. But eventually, when you reach a cruising speed, I think 10 to 15 minutes a day of someone's time to monitor the posts that are coming in, or to post themselves, communication from the organization, and to monitor that everything is still in place as it should be. I definitely think that's a good estimate.
Great, thanks, Nadine. The other one that I had was about Google Alerts. It sounds like it's an interesting service. Someone was asking how they can access Google Alerts.
Oh, okay. Honestly, I think it's quite as simple as if you go to google.com/alerts. If you type that in your browser, it's a really simple interface. There's nothing too complicated. It honestly just tells you, I can't remember exactly which order, but it honestly just tells you what keywords would you like to search for, and what is your email address, so that these alerts are delivered to you the way you choose to. I know there's a couple more options. You can choose how often they're sent to you. Is it every day, or anytime something comes up, or as a digest every week? I'm not sure exactly the options, but you can choose the frequency. And then also the only thing that I would recommend for personal experience is think about the way you write your keywords. So things like, you know, our company's Integration New Media, obviously when I want to write the keywords, I usually put it in between quotation marks, so that it's really just Integration New Media, as opposed to just new or just media or a combination thereof. And also think about variants. So obviously I'll look for Integration New Media, but I'll look for INM as well. If there's different spellings of certain keywords, you want to think about that.
Excellent. That's great, Nadine. Thank you. That's actually all we had for questions so far. And if I look at just a quick check on the questions tab, there's nothing else that's come in. If there's anything else that does arise, certainly we've got a couple more minutes here. In the meantime, I mentioned at the beginning of this session that we would be recording, and we would make that available to our users. So that's something that we will add to our YouTube channel this week, and we'll make sure we get a note out to you about where that location of that video is. So we'll make sure that's available. If there's anything that does arise after the fact in terms of questions, I would encourage you to contact us. I think perfect. Our email addresses are up on screen now. So either Nadine or myself can help you out with any individual questions. If there's anything you want to discuss about your particular strategy, we're open to that as well. So I don't see any more questions that have come in, so we'll call it a day on the webinar, and if anything does arise, we'll definitely address those individually. Thank you so much for attending. We've got a number of other sessions that are scheduled in the next 2 months as well. So if there's anything that would interest you, I'd encourage you to take a look at our website. We've got our fall webinar schedule posted there right off our homepage. The next session that we're going to be doing is something that's really interesting about how to develop your site for the desktop, the web, and everything in between. We're going to be looking at the concept of it's called responsive web design. So that's happening next month on October 18th. One of our UX specialists will be giving that, but it's not a very technical webinar. It's more of a conceptual webinar that will help people understand where they may want to pursue this option. And we've got one coming up in November on creating customer engagement, which is going to focus on some of the tools and technologies and the processes involved in doing that. So I'd encourage you to take a look at our site and sign up for anything that may interest you, and pass the word along to your colleagues if you've enjoyed the session today. Great, thanks for coming, and we'll hopefully see you at another webinar in the future.